Very good afternoon, everyone. Great to see all of you here, and to see folks around in the booths as well. I'm only going to take 10 to 15 minutes because I'm going to share a little bit more about how companies can enhance the inclusive hiring of folks from disadvantaged groups in their workplace. And I refer to disadvantaged groups very broadly, but specifically since we're at the Tech for Good event, focusing on inclusive hiring of persons with disabilities, I'm going to be focusing on that in my short little spiel today. And importantly, I'm going to share with you about how some of the work that we are doing at SMU, which is just around the corner, it's 1 or 2 bus stops away, and how we work with companies to help them be more inclusive in their organizations. Can I just have a quick show of hands? And from folks sitting right here, as well as those wandering around the booths, can I see a quick show of hands? How many of you work for companies that have an aspiration to be more inclusive in their hiring? Show of hands. How many of you work for companies? Great. Who work for companies that have an aspiration? Yeah, Microsoft guys are like this. Higher, no? Yeah, okay, excellent, wonderful. How many of you, I guess the reason why you are here is because you support this movement, but I feel a little, I feel your pain that your companies may not really be supporting that work, right? And I can imagine why, right? This is difficult and it is challenging, and I'll share with you some of our solutions about how we're trying to rectify some of that, okay? So our position, so some of the work that I study, some of the work that I do is focused on routines, organizational routines, right? I'm looking at how work is done. How do we get work done? And the basic unit of getting work done is the routine, right? The tasks, the sequence of actions that you're performing, okay? And as I was doing some of that work, I realized that a lot of times, organizations are organizing work, structuring work around speed, efficiency, maximizing profit, all right? And this all sounds great, the stuff that we learn about in our basic economics textbook, right? But that's not always the case. It doesn't always have to be centered around maximizing profit, okay? You can still make a profit, right? You can still have other social goals, environmental goals, right? Without compromising on profit, right? That's one thing. And number two, even if there's a compromise, you're compromising a little on profit, it doesn't mean that you're running at a loss, right? You may lose a little money, it may be a bit costly in the short term, but over the long term, you may more than make up for it. You might be creating value in different ways, right? So that was one of the things that I noticed, that we were organizing, structuring work, right? Organizing routines around speed and efficiency. And I asked the question, what would it look like? Why can't we organize work around being more inclusive? What would work look like if we were to organize it around some of the most disadvantaged groups in our communities and in our societies, right? The problem when you organize work around maximizing profit is that you assume that people come with a basic set of skills and abilities, right? We are assuming that there's a round hole and everyone has to fit that hole, okay? For some of us, we are able to do so because we are educated, you have skills, you have resources and what have you. But for certain groups of people, they don't have the ability to do that. And what do we then do? We tell them that they're unemployable, right? We do our best to kind of mold these square pegs into round holes when it's actually really difficult, something that's difficult to do. And so the idea behind this, redesigning work, redesigning routines around the disadvantage, around persons with disabilities, the idea behind that is to say, what can we do to change these to change these round holes into square ones so that the square pegs can better fit in. Okay, so that's the whole idea behind this book. I do this work with my colleagues at SMU, Daniel Mack and Jovina Ang. And where we're starting from is this premise that it's not all about maximizing profit, right? Profit is important. We're not asking businesses to run at a loss, okay? We're saying maybe you make a little bit more money today You make a little bit less today, but you can make it up in the future, all right? And so there's a quote from the CEO of Chobani where he says that if you bring reasons to it other than profit, okay, that's what a good business is, and that's what sustainability is really about as well, all right? So how do we redesign work to enhance inclusion, right? So I talked about how we are trying to how we typically try to plug people into the organization, but we want to change that thinking. How do we change work? Change the way work is done, change the routines, change the flow, the workflow, right? So that they can accommodate both, you can help you make money as well as accommodate people from these disadvantaged groups, right? It's this idea that if you are looking at the workflow, right, as using an input process outcomes model, right? If you want the same outcomes, but if you have different inputs, what has to change? Yeah, this is not PSLE math. My son is doing his PSLE math on Monday. I think there's a much simpler equation, but we have to change our processes. It's that simple. What we've been focused on is mostly changing the inputs. And I'm not saying that changing inputs or empowering or uplifting and scaling them up I'm not saying those are not important. Those are important as well, but we also need to adjust the processes and workflows. Okay, the way work is structured, that's something that we want to work on. Now the problem is, this involves, I'm going to skip through this, because it talks about some of the ways that we restructure and reorder work. And, we talk about this in the book, right? But I'm not selling the book. It's highly exclusive, but I'll share with you how to get a copy of it later on. Because we're not selling books, we're trying to get companies to adopt and change. So it's not just about the books. But what we're trying to do really is to get companies to change. And the difficulty around that is that change is very difficult, okay? When we're talking about just changing the way we hire, that part is easier, right? We're talking about expanding the search to include folks from disadvantaged groups. That part is still easy. But when you're talking about changing the way you work, changing your routines, okay, that is going to be much, much harder. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why we don't see as many companies being inclusive, right? Taking more people in, or after they've taken people in, right, it's hard for them to stay in the job because the jobs were not designed to retain them in the first place, right? So what the solution is, redesign jobs, but it's difficult. So how? Like this, right? What we do is, the way we are doing that, right, is through a program in SMU, right, called SMU-X. And what it really is a way for corporate partners, right, to work with SMU students on some of these projects, right? And so if you have a company that's interested in inclusive hiring, right? Whether it's persons with disabilities, ex-offenders, single mothers, low-income, folks from low-income households with significant caregiving responsibilities, right? They are all facing some level of disadvantage, right? If your company has an aspiration to bring in people like this, but they don't know how and they don't know what to change, come and talk to us, because we'll have students looking into these questions for you. FOC, yeah, buy one, get one free, I mean, it's better than that, it's just free, all right? We run this as a 12-week project, right? And we have our students visit the sites. They develop a deep understanding of business issues, as well as the issues faced by the beneficiaries. So it's not just saying, here's what our guys need, here's what the beneficiaries need, you change, right? Neither is it saying that here's what the business needs, you guys fit in. We're doing it both ways. We're understanding the abilities and constraints of both the businesses as well as the beneficiary population, and then we're crafting a solution around that to say, all right, how can we redesign work in such a way, right? The students formulate recommendations, solutions, and implementation plans over the 12 weeks. And I'll share with you some examples of projects that we're currently working on. Right? So this is a snack box company, and we are working with them to redesign workflow to better accommodate persons with intellectual disabilities. One of our other projects in next year is with a property management company. They work a lot, not with persons with disabilities, but a lot of people from low-income households. Some of them have to travel across the border from Malaysia. And so how do we design work, right, so that it can better accommodate some of their life circumstances, right? And for low-income households, right, for low-income workers, some of the redesign that we are talking about, right, involves how information is shared. It could be around how how frequently payment is made, okay? That involves a huge redesign of organizational systems as well, right? Right now, most payments are done on a monthly basis. But if you look at the research for folks from low-income households, at the end of the month, if they wait till the end of the month, they become really, really stretched. And that's when they take on a lot of debt and loans. And so that perpetuates the cycle, right? When you ask companies, why don't you just pay them more frequently? It involves actually a huge change in routines as well, right? Involves changes in when they collect cash and how they pay out and things like that, right? So all that is something that we study, and we make recommendations to companies about how they can introduce these changes so that you can be better at accommodating folks from these disadvantaged groups, including persons with disabilities, all right? So in a nutshell, we have mentors from EY, People's Advisory Services as well, and various community partners like from Engineering Good to mentor our students as well, right? So in a nutshell, the key idea here is that if we want to move the needle on inclusive hiring, right, it's not just about upscaling your beneficiaries. That is part of the equation. It's not just about finding a better match between employers and employees. That's important as well, but it doesn't end there. It has to also include change within the organization. That is costly, that is expensive, that requires a risk for the organization to take. And that's where we at SMU, we can take on some of this risk, de-risk it for you, and hopefully make it easier for companies to embrace this change and be more inclusive in that process. So that's all I have to share with you for today. I have a few copies of the book around. If you're interested in partnering with us, there's a course that I teach together with Johan from Engineering Good. Johan, are you around? Yeah. Those of you who know Johan will be quite amazed that he's actually teaching a course in a university. But that's how inclusive we are. You know, I manage him a fair bit. But this is what we do, and if you'd love to connect and share more about these ideas, please feel free to reach out. Otherwise, thank you very much for being here and supporting Engineering Good and Tech for Good event. And look forward to catching up with the rest of you at around the booths after this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth, very much for coming out today. Your conversation just now has definitely rolled on from the original panel. And I think can solve a lot of the problems that we do have with ensuring that we can introduce and then embed inclusive hiring into our organizations and our workplace.
Yes. Thank you, John. Yeah. I mean, I think embedding is the right word. If we can change, I mean, because the routines, that's a fundamental unit of work. If we make those changes there, it actually sticks. It makes it a lot easier for people to come in, from different groups to come in. But like our previous panel has said, right, everyone's needs are different. So some of those changes have to be localized. We need the buy-in not just of HR, but we need the buy-in of business unit managers as well, right? So that change has to permeate throughout the organization and not just at one unit within HR.
And I think another important consideration is the cost to implement those changes. Yep. Using something like your Playbook can definitely, you know, as you said, can take that burden off the corporate to actually be able to introduce those effectively.
Yes. So the SMU-X platform helps to reduce, de-risk some of these initiatives. So if the company has aspirations to do so, but they're worried about the cost, come and talk to us. We'll study it for you. We'll come up with solutions for you. But I'll be honest, some of these change is always costly, right? It can be costly financially, it can be costly organizationally, politically, socially as well. And that's why it's difficult to do, right? But at least in studying the problem, studying the issue, and studying how the change can be carried out, the organization and its leaders will have a better sense of what that cost is. Then they'll know, well, if I'm going to make this change, here's what it's going to cost me. Am I willing or not to make that change?
Totally. So I saw you had your LinkedIn profile up there earlier. How else?
I hope that's my LinkedIn profile because not my Tinder profile, right? Yeah.
Could we have that LinkedIn profile back up on the screen? I think it's important if anybody from a corporate who's looking to introduce inclusive hiring into their business, or if you're struggling with your inclusive hiring, please reach out to Kenneth. More than willing to help get you off the ground and help you solve any issues or problems you may be having.
Yeah, thanks, John. Or if you don't have, why is my face so big there? Yeah, if you don't have LinkedIn, you can just do a Google search for Kenneth Goh SMU, and you'll see my contact details there. Or you might, since our friends from Microsoft are here as well, you might do a Bing search. But I see that Google is a sponsor, so I think Google, do the Google search. That'll be better for us. Yeah. So thank you, John. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kenneth. Great to have you here today.